I don't want to avoid this anymore. I'm not going to feel at home in my own body. I'm not going to feel at home with my relatives. I had to write this so that I could talk to them. I had to write this to feel at ease with each other in the room.
This is Salvis Unidos podcast with your host, Carlos Cuadrón.
Miraste la ventana, eran 6 de la mañana y no podías ni soñar.
What happens when a cookbook becomes a vessel for cultural memory? Today, Karla from SalviSoul returns to the podcast to break down the emotional labor behind documenting a community's untold stories and why finishing a project can change the way you walk through the world. Welcome, everyone, to an episode of Salvis Unidos podcast. This is the first time we are recording in front of a live audience, so let's give a hand to our audience here in Queens. Awesome. We are at the Worldsboro Bookshop in Jackson Heights, Queens. So shout out to them for allowing us to hold this event here today and to welcome Karla to New York City for the third time?
Second time.
Awesome. And now you guys probably know we have Karla from SalviSoul with us today. Say hi to Karla. Let's get a round of applause for Karla. Awesome. So, Karla, this is really exciting to have you on a podcast again. And I say again because we recorded a podcast way back 2020, I think. I think that was around the time. Do you remember where you were with SalviSoul at that time?
2020, I don't think I even had an agent yet, much less an actual deal, much less to finish manuscript, very, very far from what the book actually looked like. I felt very far away. I felt closer actually to giving up and then feeling, man, I can't even do that. I'm in it too deep to stop. So I was in a very raw emotional place. So I was really encouraged when you approached me to say, hey, I'd like to offer you a platform to talk about what you're working on, because that's really what eventually landed me an audience with an agent, an audience with publishers. It's my community took me seriously first and then said, we like what you're doing, so let's talk about it. So thank you.
Awesome. Yes, incredible. I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad we were able to do that for you. And I think that, we always got to build our platform and our audience first ourselves, right? Because if we're not willing to step up for each other, like who else will, right? And it's so hard to believe 2020, there was no SalviSoul cookbook. Like now it's like everywhere. It's been out for over a year now. It came out last April. Yes. So it's been out for a year and a few months. You have your YouTube series, Salvi Los Angeles, out on YouTube. How does it feel? Does it feel like you got a weight off your back now with your two big projects out in the world?
Yes, I think there was this epiphany I had while working on the book. And often, I meet so many incredible folks in LA, so many artists, Central Americans I meet online. And I feel like my wish for all of us is that we get to see completed projects, because ganas no faltan, ideas no faltan. Like, I think that the drive that our community has creatively, like we have so much, some of us are even feeling like so frustrated with this creative energy that we can't see to completion when we have this idea in our mind. So I think I walk differently. I'm a different person. I walk this earth in a very different way because I took something from A to Z, and I know what a privilege that is. I also was able to do that in a way that felt good for me. One of the first things I told, my publishing team was, I don't want to have pupusas on the cover. And there was this temptation to make sure that we created a cover or visuals that made it easy for the American public to be like, oh, I know what that is. I know where to put that, And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to create something that was timeless, And so even the way we did it, how we did it, I feel so good about that. And So yes, seeing the book out, and I love that it's not just me holding it in my office crying alone. Now it's with all of you, and I get a lot of emails and messages. Karla, your book made me cry. I'm like, girl, I know it's a lot. This is not usually how you write a cookbook. Sometimes cookbooks are subjects, about things that fascinate you. And oftentimes for our communities, when we come from marginalized communities where we're not giving the mic, you do have to write about your emotional pain to sometimes see the door open, and that is an unfair thing. So it is a lot of my emotional life in this book. And so it's not crazy when folks say, yeah, I was crying. This moved me. So it feels good that it's connecting with folks. And yeah, the series, that was kind of an insane thing too. I did not plan to do a series right before launching a cookbook.
That's a lot of work.
It was a lot of work, but yeah, I don't know, man. My dad, he has this consejo that I think is terrible advice. But nevertheless, I let it, speak to me, And the consejo he always says is, if there's an open door, don't ask questions, just go through it. I don't know. I
get you into trouble sometimes.
Yeah, I'm going to ask some questions. But there was an opportunity for me where someone approached me and said, there's a grant that we want to give, we want to invite people to apply to grants that usually these grants go to muralists, things that you can visibly see benefiting a community. And very often the culinary arts aren't really taken seriously if you're not trying to be a chef or a pop-up or something like that, especially food storytelling. What even is that? And this person, said, I want you to apply to this because I think you'd be a great candidate. And I thought, okay, well, I don't really love grants. I think sometimes they're a waste of time. And especially when you are someone who has to, check a few boxes for them to feel good about where they're putting their money. I don't like it. I feel icky. No me gusta. I don't want to spend my time doing that. But this was one of those things where I looked at the information they had given me and I said, I'm going to spend 5 hours on this application. No more. Put the timer on. That's it. They're going to get 5 hours of my time, and that's all they got. And we got the grant. And I thought, okay, holy shit.
What do I do now?
Yeah. And originally, what I had pitched in the grant was to do food storytelling cooking sessions, because that's essentially what SalviSoul is. And LA, has a huge Salvadoran community. And we have the outdoor Salvadoran market that is an enormous market. It started with one coconut vendor, and now there's like over 100 vendors there. And I wanted to highlight this because I've pitched to the LA Times what the vendors go through. And I've been told many times by their editors, there's not a story here. This isn't interesting. We need, I even had an editor that said, we might find it interesting if you could find a gang member who had a food pop-up.
Wow. So we're only valid when we're committing crime.
Yeah, when we're edgy. And this is somebody who's by all intents and purposes down, So it was a really weird thing. Anyway, tangents. Where was I? I decided to highlight the people who are the cultural workers, the folks who are in food, and they're saying, hey, I am Salvadoran, I'm proud of it, and I'm not trying to water down what I'm here to do. And I felt like it deserved to be highlighted. So I highlighted 5 different Salvadoran creatives who are in food, 2 mixologists. One of them is Adri, and she makes a cocktail with a curtido shrub. It's so delicious. She makes the curtido, then she dehydrates it, and then she puts that on the rim of the cocktail. Amazing, yeah. It is ooh. I'm the kind of person that if I'm eating a salad with balsamic vinegar, I'll down the thing. So this was speaking my language. And we had Tony, who is the LA rep, or was the LA rep for Cihuatan, which is the first Salvadoran rum company from El Salvador. And he taught me so much about rum in El Salvador. And then we had Gardenia, who is doing Cipota coffee. And, it was just a really wonderful thing to highlight Maricela, a street vendor, Chef Awa, who's doing their own pop-up. And it felt just as important as the cookbook. It felt insane also, though. And I think from this time in my life, I also learned how budgets are creative tools. It's not just CapCut. It's not just all those things. A budget can really help you celebrate the talents of your community. It was so exciting to be able to pay my friends and say, like, hey, there's, the strikes were happening in LA in the film industry. So I got to hire my friends who are incredible at what they do. And we got to make something that in, 2055, if someone's curious about what was happening in LA, who was documenting the stories of the young folks who were creating and innovating, hopefully they'll put that in the search, or I don't know what the internet will look like by then, but they'll have a record. And yeah, the LA Times didn't cover it. We did.
That's incredible, Karla. Like when you think about it in that perspective, right? Like a lot of people think about the here and now. We got to get those likes, be an influencer now. But what we're really doing is creating a public record, documenting our culture, and this kind of new diasporic culture here in the United States. And what is the third, fourth, fifth generation going to think when they want to connect to El Salvador? They can look at stuff like Salvi Los Angeles, maybe one day Salvi New York, and be able to, look back and see, that's what we went through. That's what we struggled with. That's what our culture looked like back then. And it looks incredible. Like it definitely gives me, like this could be a Netflix. It looks like, Anthony Bourdain vibes, going around to different vendors, trying different food. It looks really good. Original titles, original music. It's very well produced. Incredible.
Listen, thank you for bringing up the original music, because I love scores for movies. Like I will dive in to a score, and I really love, it's just the cumbia, the marimba, like all of the salsa. I felt like we need to have that component there, because the food and the visuals, okay, we got it. But I wanted to say, like, we don't need to take from any of these things. Like, we can create our own. And it's original music by Alex Campos. And he did an incredible job. The jingle, I get so happy every time I hear it. And the production value is something I'm so, so proud of.
It's super good. Where can people watch it?
YouTube, SalviSoul. And each episode is less than 10 minutes. Essentially what we wanted to do was have the whole thing be less than 30 minutes. I have submitted it as a film documentary to different award things, and haven't gotten a single one, but we submit nevertheless.
Eventually, maybe you'll be Karla, the author and filmmaker. Incredible. Let's talk a little bit about the book. One of the passages that really stuck out for me was right in the beginning, where you talk about your first trip to El Salvador at 17. I think your parents were trying to cement your identity, your Salvadoran identity, before you went off to college. And you write that you found that you didn't find that sense of belonging, that sense of home. So take us back to that trip, and can you tell us what you were going through emotionally, and why was it that you didn't feel that sense of belonging during that trip?
Yeah, I was 17. I was going to go to college that fall. And my dad has always been very, I don't know, pessimistic, kind of. I think he has a lot of fears as an immigrant father. And I think he saw, the media, or what he understood of college students is they're going to leave and then not come back. And so he was just ready, talking with my mom, like, Karla needs to go to El Salvador. She needs to go. And so there was this very purposeful feeling, like, we're not going for fun. We're going to go visit places where we lost our innocence. We're going to go visit places that the building may not be there, but I know that that's where that happened, and that was an insane thing. My brother was 12 at the time and I was 17. And from what I remember, it was just this really, I was there to observe, I don't really, I know it sounds terrible, I don't really remember it being a fun trip, but I remember every moment of that trip. I knew, like, I'm here to work, I'm here to pay attention, I'm here, if I can open my eyeballs more than I already am, I need to, like, smell the color, like, take it in as much as I can. And, I met so many family members, and it was special to see my family take me to these different spots. But I also felt, I think at that moment, I realized I need to develop my own connection to El Salvador. I cannot have my own relationship through my parents, like through proxy. Like, that can only take me so far. That can only introduce me to that surface level. And I don't want to be that. I think you're supposed to feel rooted and grounded. You're not supposed to hang on to the branches of someone else's rootedness, And so what I really wanted to know was, can I feel like I belong here? And I couldn't, I remember feeling jealous of the kids that were like 7 and their Spanish was like,
I know, incredible.
They could run circles around me, and they were so incredible, and I felt like I haven't used this word in decades, but I felt like a dweeb. Do we use that word?
I'm not sure if they... We can look it up. I'll put a link to your Urban Dictionary, dweeb.
Yeah, dweeb. Like, I felt dweeb. Like, this is, why aren't you keeping up, And yeah, it was a lot of feelings. It was a lot of feelings. And, all of those things, that's not usually the things that you find in a cookbook. Like, you are not going to find these, like, stories. And again, like, what you as an author trying to figure out, like, what you can offer is your most honest self. And I didn't want to include those things. I didn't want to write about my grandmother's domestic violence that she had to suffer from my grandfather, but I couldn't write anything else. And all of these stories were very sobering, and I also felt like they were the reason that gave me the drive to do the storytelling to begin with.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I noticed that all the stories in the book definitely center some kind of grief, some kind of loss, whether it be due to running from the Civil War, domestic violence, losing a loved one. Is there, how can I ask this question? Like, there's also a lot of celebration in El Salvador. What was behind the conscious decision of deciding I'm going to include, or was there a conscious decision to include stories that mostly deal with grief and loss in the book?
It was hard. I'll say this. I feel like every immigrant has an odyssey to tell. And I felt like my job was huge. It was tremendous. Like, who am I to say that I can write, Teresa's story when she had, just by the age of 13, like, she had an incredible journey. And what I learned as a writer is also that there is so much power in giving you a snippet of someone. Brevity is a wonderful tool in explaining the life of someone. I thought, could we look at a small moment, a moment that was 10 minutes in this person's life, and really dissect it to see what was happening, and could that give you an illustration of how this person walked in their life? And that's what I felt was more doable. So I would interview each of the women. I interviewed each of them several times. Each time we met, it was like 3 to 4 hour interviews. And I would listen back to the tape over and over again. And I was looking for chispas. I was looking for sparks. And you could hear it. I could even, by listening to the tape, I could hear how they shifted their weight in their seat. Or they were like snapping their fingers. Or they were like, let me tell you this, There was an excitement. There was something, a moment that teaches you about living in what they were sharing. And that felt exciting to me. And immediately I gravitated to those. And some of them, are epic journeys. Like we have the story of Laura and of her crossing the border with her aunt who has period cramps as they're crossing. And I thought that was so crazy. Like, I don't think about these other things are still happening as these crazy things are happening.
Right. It's like we think that everything stops and you're just a machine crossing a border, but you're still very much human.
Yeah, these things are still very much, they're going to happen. And yeah, that's an epic tale, but there's also stories of Bartola. She was one of the first women I interviewed. And the story of, that she shared was about her husband. And Bartola never learned how to read or write. And when I asked her, what's the thing you're most proud of? Oftentimes the moms would say, oh, my children. And not Bartola. Bartola said that I got a driver's license in California. And I'm like, but you don't, and she's like, yes, I know I don't read or write, but you can get a license without learning how to read or write. I was like, wow. So I'm looking up like driver's license codes, like, trying to verify all this. And from her sharing this, she says, the other thing I really wanted to do when I was young, because I knew it would be hard for me to learn how to read or write, I really wanted to tell time. I looked at the, clock. I couldn't figure out what those signs were. I couldn't figure out what the hands were doing. And then she shares this story that's very tender about how she met her husband. And her husband's a painter who makes signs. And he tenderly explained to her, this hand means this hand means that. Together they hold time. And I just thought that was I loved it. I want to swim in this moment. And those were the kinds of things that you could hear her voice as she was sharing the story. This is an essence of who I am, sharing it with you. And so that is essentially what made it to the book. And even when some of the people who nominated the women, they sometimes would say, Karla, you should ask her about this. This was a really hard thing that she survived. Ask her. Sometimes it was well-meaning kids because they're like, this was a great story. We want to make sure it gets documented. And then I would ask and quickly learned these are stories for family, not for someone asking you with a well-meaning heart. This is not for me. This is for family's ears only. And when I just listened to them with no agenda of my own or their children or their family, that's where the magic, the chispas really came. And that's what felt most exciting to me.
That's awesome. Do you think we'll ever get a SalviSoul audio project? Do you think we'll ever be able to listen to those stories, or are they in the archives forever?
I actually asked my agent, and because it's a cookbook, they did try to do audiobooks for cookbooks many years ago, and they just didn't do well. And again, all of this is a product. I don't know how long it takes to read all the stories. We have about 30 stories. I would love it. I don't think I can independently without the permission of my publisher. But it is something that I love because I'd love to give folks the experience of listening to the story the way that I listen to it.
Yeah, just you telling the story, it sounds incredible. It's like, it's such a different, you can read the book and you can reference it, you can imagine, but hearing little details that wouldn't make it into the book, like the sound of someone shuffling, the onomatopoeia Salvadorans love to use in their storytelling. You kind of lose that in the book, and that's just a different kind of life to audio. So hopefully, maybe one day we'll get to listen to that. A lot of the stories again dealt with really dark subjects, and I'm wondering, how did you do it? I know you've spoken about this in the past. You're carrying, not only did you have to dive into your own trauma and the trauma of your family and the grandma and difficult things they went through. Now there's all these women, and you can even think of it this way, a whole community whose trauma you're having to detail and write into this book. How did you handle all that? How did you do the emotional labor required to create a product out of real pain?
This was really hard. I think I was really desperate to not lose and not forget where I'm from. Not my grandmother, I started this with her in 2015 and she passed in 2018. And I think I needed to work on this in order to work through my grief. I didn't think it was fair that I've said this in public, so I always feel funny saying it because my grandmother loved my grandfather. I don't know that my grandfather cared for my grandmother the way she deserved. I don't think he recognized that. He is my last grandparent. And I was angry about that. And I was also angry at her because I'm like, you raised me to protect this man. You raised me to defend him. You raised me to love him. You raised me to feel like I had two versions of him. And I needed to work through that. I needed to unpack my own womanhood. I needed to ask those questions. I wanted to feel closeness with my mom. I had emotional needs that my mom could never really meet me there because she was going through it as a daughter, you know? And so I think the pain was too much. There's an author, I'm forgetting her name, but it's a cover with blue, it's a blue cover. And they describe two kinds of pain. They describe clean pain and dirty pain. And this is essentially the choice that I was coming to. And the way they describe dirty pain is there's trauma that you are dealing with, but everything you do to avoid it is causing this dirty pain that you feel icky inside. You can't escape it. You're just like, oh, I'm avoiding this person and it'll never go away. I just have to avoid it long enough, but it'll always catch up. It'll always be there. And they talk about the alternative being clean pain, addressing it. It hurts, it's uncomfortable, but you feel good afterwards. You feel clean, but it's still so painful. And I think writing this book in the way we did it was my coming to that fork in the road and saying, I don't want to avoid this anymore. I'm not going to feel at home in my own body. I'm not going to feel at home with my relatives. I had to write this so that I could talk to them. I had to write this to feel at ease with each other in the room. Less goes unsaid now because I was able to go there and go through this journey of doing it. But I cried a lot. I did a lot of mistakes. I took on way more than I could digest. Even just digitally, like I was interviewing the women in Spanglish too. And so when I was trying to transcribe, like every kind of mistake you can think, I made it. And it was very overwhelming. And yeah, publishing took forever. It took me 10 years to get this book done. And yeah, it was because publishing didn't care for it, but also it's because that's also the weight of la carga that our community, has to, that's where we're starting. That's our starting point.
Do you have any advice for people that maybe outside of writing a whole cookbook on how to begin to process family pain and family trauma like this?
One thing I feel with our generation is that sometimes we feel entitled to our parents' stories because they make us feel rooted, and we should feel rooted, right? But I think that you need to have respect for what they've gone through, you know. The story always belongs to the storyteller first. If they don't feel ready, if it's going to cause them harm, it's not necessary. If you're ready, sure, you know. But I'll just take it easy. Have some respect for what was the price of what this cost you know. Like, so much of these stories are about love, but love requires a sacrifice. And que bonito to just pay money, right? No, some of them paid with, you know, loved ones lost. So I think it's just having respect for life and knowing that a real life force is what made it possible for you to exist and be here. So have some respect for that, and don't, yeah, like, I don't know, tread lightly with your loved ones.
Well, Karla, I think that's what makes your book so good, because it's not just a cookbook with a bunch of recipes, it's these stories. And I think not just Salvadorans, but diaspora, and really people anywhere can relate to these like really traumatic events and see like what it took to get to where we are now, whether it's to get our recipes to where we are now or to get us, like you and me. We're sitting here because our parents and their parents went through so much. So thank you for doing this difficult work, this difficult emotional labor to bring us this gift.
I was gonna say anytime, but I don't mean that. No, not anytime. It has been a true privilege to honestly carry this. I feel just immense gratitude for every person who finds SalviSoul. When I get messages from folks who've said, "Oh my gosh, Karla, like it was a dream." I felt like such a faraway dream to think of a book in a bookstore, Salvi food right there. And now that it's there, I'm just like, wow, no me lo puedo creer.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah. Now this question has been sitting on my mind for a couple of years now. I think it goes outside SalviSoul, but and so bear with me. I feel like this is more like an essay than a question, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. Let me see. Where do I start? So a couple of months ago, be different threads. A couple of months ago, you posted something on Instagram and included an article in your newsletter about someone that made a joke about how pupusas should be cost cents. Yeah, so that seemed to be something that you felt was important enough that you needed to respond to it. Can you tell us a little bit about what was it about that statement that made you feel like I need to respond to this?
Yes. So I, was online minding my own business, and I came across a post of a Salvi creator who, a lot of Salvi creators will have merch. And this merch was a T-shirt that said, it was a riff off "Make America Great Again," but it said "Make pupusas 25 cents again," or 25 centavos, something like that. And immediately I was just fuming. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it was." I felt so offended. I felt so offended because often. I don't love when I see comedians who make fun of women, who make fun of women's humor. Like we see it. Media doesn't take, I don't know, the things that young women find interesting. We call it like cringe. It's just things that women like are never treasured, right? The point of view of a woman is always like, oh, especially mothers. Sometimes you see a ton of successful Latino comedians who've become famous because they put a T-shirt on their head to make a skit of their mom, and it's just their mom being so weighted by their incompetency, So I felt like, you know what, I'm not even going to tag this man. I'm just going to write my point of view. And I interviewed a few folks. I interviewed through pupuserias, one from LA, one from Oakland, and one from Baltimore. And I said, can you just break down the cost of what, why is this such a ludicrous thing to joke about? When women's labor is the punchline, you really need to reevaluate what kind of comic you think you are and what you think you're offering the culture. And also riffing off of that slogan is at best misguided, and at worst, like maybe not misguided. He believes these things. And so I wrote about this because pupusas take days. To prepare pupusas, you have the curtido, you have la salsa, you have the fillings, you have the masa. the frijoles, every time I go to a new pupuseria, I always get the frijol con queso, and I'm really looking to taste the frijoles. If the frijoles are bomb, the rest of the menu will be bomb. And I've been disappointed before, you know. There's a certain sazon, there's a certain toque, you know. Koreans have this word, sonmat. I don't think I'm saying it right, but I love it, and I have a lot of reverence for that word because it means hand taste. And it's, you know, what you do with this, you put it in the food. You know, there's an alchemy there. And him wanting to make a buck off of a shirt that said, I can't even say it again, infuriated me. And I wanted to tag him so he would know I was talking shit, but I also was like, I don't even want to link it. I just don't want. But yeah, this was really hard because I think that, I don't know, sometimes you think, oh, am I taking it too seriously? Like, should I calm down? Like, put the AC on, drink some iced coffee, and maybe I'll feel better. But no, don't talk yourself out of a good, like, crash out, you know? Like, if you have reasons to. If that's your impulse, then follow it. That is actually what makes you the best person to say something. And that is actually the thing that needed to be said. It te nace. You want to say it. And so don't suppress that feeling. And thank you for reading it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course. Yeah. It really struck me. And I think it's like, you know, anybody that's been in a long-term relationship, sometimes your partner will get mad at something very small, but they're usually not mad about that little thing. It's like a whole root system behind that has just triggered them. And I think this is an example of that community-wide where, like, yeah, maybe that shirt, maybe you could have just ignored it, but it wasn't just a shirt. It wasn't just a message. It's what it pointed to as a whole community to the way you view stuff like this. And it calls back to your first episode of Salvi Los Angeles with the street vendor talking about how people didn't respect her food because she's a street vendor. Like, well, you're not a restaurant. Why should I pay this? And it reminds me also of David Sorto from Rinconcito Restaurant up in Portchester. When I interviewed him, he was like, you know, we just continue to devalue our food. Like, other cultures don't do that, but we do. We don't want to pay X amount, even though our food or this specific food, pupusas, takes so long to make. So maybe it was just a bad joke and a bad taste and a bad t-shirt, but I think it really points into big, deep problems in our community.
And, you know, one of the things that I'm remembering this bit that I wrote for it was when we go to an Italian restaurant, for instance, you see ravioli on there. And usually I always get pissed off because it's like 3 or sometimes it's 1 and it's like $27 because the egg yolk is still like intact and, you know, the oozing, and that's why you're paying such a premium price. But if you look at the ingredients, if you look at the makeup of what a ravioli is, it's the same thing as a pupusa, but it's not taken as seriously. It's not given the same credence in the culinary world. This is comida callejera, and this is elevated, you know, cuisine worthy of a really high price point. And yeah, I want folks to, I don't know, like, we're punching down at ourselves. That is what is see, I'm getting all my words are stumbling. He is punching down at himself is the harm that he's perpetuating, a harm of these racist principles, colonial legacies, and how we talk to our community. I don't know, have some diligence, have some discernment of what is funny. Comics are punching up. Like, any good comic worth their salt is going to punch up. Like, that is the jester at the court, you know. I don't know, man. Maybe I should get into comic show.
Maybe you should. Why not? So starting the second thread of this essay, you included this really cool dish in the book, Gallo and chicha. And what was really interesting about it was that, so I forget the name of the lady that contributed it, but she she was a little bit hesitant to include this dish because I can't remember the exact words. They're like, this is campesino food, this is countryside food. Another word would be like peasant food or like working class food. And maybe that shouldn't belong in a cookbook, but you told her this is exactly the kind of dish I want to include. Can you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to include that dish and what reflection you had on her thinking that way about this dish?
Yeah. So when I met Miriam, she lives in Orange County, kind of far from where I am, and her daughter nominated her. And I was just connecting with strangers online. I didn't know who they were. And I was like, okay, we're just going to go up and see what happens. And I show up to her house, very, very pleasant experience. And then we talk, we have a great interview. Finally, we get to talking about what recipe would you like to contribute to the book? And she says, pupusas. And I'm like, oh, how do I tell her? Like, we have a few people for pupusas already. And a lot of the moms, that was a whole nother thing of like, how do you not anger all the moms who want to do like the same dish? So I just had to tell her, well, I met this woman first and, she wanted to do that. So is there something else that you would like to contribute? And, she did like the Salvi mom thing where like, I'm just disappointed.
You messed up. You
messed up. There's nothing you can do to make it up to me. And I said, bueno, ¿qué tal? ¿Hay algo que sus hijos les gusta? Is there something your children really love? And she just thinks, crosses her arms, and finally she's like, bueno, there's gallo and chicha. And I had never heard of this dish. And I'm like, gallo and chicha, what is that? And she's like, no, this isn't something it's not like something worth writing down, certainly not for a cookbook. I said, well, by this point, I had realized that a lot of the women, we start to repeat certain myths that are told to us about us. And she just said like, yeah, this is comida de campesino. This isn't important food. And I had learned, instead of trying to correct them, because that also isn't helpful, it can be harmful, I just said, well, why don't you explain to me what you think is nothing? And she's like, okay. And Miriam starts to detail a recipe that takes about 5 days, has more than 20 ingredients, and the way her family cooked it, you had to dig a hole. And I'm like, what? And this was just so fascinating. She's like, oh, we don't even eat this dish anymore because the only person who could cook it was her mother. And her mother converted to Jehovah's Witnesses. And there's alcohol, 2 kinds of alcohol in the dish. And because there was alcohol, her mom's like, no, ya no puedo cocinar this dish. And she's like, but I know a lot of Salvadoran people will have pupusas or panes con pavo for holidays. Not us. We always had gallo and chicha. None of this tamales, none of this panes con pavo, pupusas. That's not what we did in our canton. I was like, okay, so let's do that recipe. And she was just so stunned. She's like, but you sure you want this? And I'm like, yes. And it was one of the most exciting dishes I've had. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is amazing. It's the kind of feeling where you're like, wow, we are so dialed in. We're actually getting this documented, And it was crazy too, because trying to get her recipe the way her mom taught it to her, she had written it down in an agenda from like 1995 or something. And so she had looked for it, found it, and she's like, I don't know, I think that's like a 6. I'm not sure. And, I kind of had to just like wing it and, really recipe develop. And no recipe is ever going to be the same. The ingredients are never going to be the same. So there's always some variation, but as best as possible, she and I came together to put what's in the book now.
Wow, incredible. Like, you think of this stuff that people travel far and wide, like these cooks looking for like these unique dishes never seen before. And like, I saw like the recipes, like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that one.
You know what? I get this message a lot. Folks get really intimidated. And I think that there are a lot of recipes that are projects. Like, yeah, pupusas is not something you want to start on a Tuesday night. Yeah, that's a joke, right? Yeah, no, you don't want to do that. But, we have home projects all the time. And honestly, right now, in the climate that we are in, it's the best time to learn a recipe from your homeland. It is the best time to get to work. And what a privilege that this is what work looks like for me right now, is just to learn this recipe and feed it to my loved ones, you know. In some cases, that could be the bare minimum, but maybe that is the most that someone can do. And I think that that is an excellent place to start.
Absolutely. Was it a conscious decision to compare the dish to coq au vin, which is like a French dish? Sounds very fancy. Has like wine in it. So like immediately you say French dish wine, you automatically think this is like fine dining. Was that conscious to compare this supposedly peasant food to this like fine dining kind of meal?
I compared it to that because when I went to cooking school, I made this dish, hated it. And I felt kind of proud of myself. I was like, yeah, I didn't like it. Because everyone was like, oh, Karla, you're making the coq au vin. Like, it's going to be crazy. Like, it's going to be so hard. And I'm like, you guys, no, it wasn't hard. And I think that we think there's all this mystery and all of this French cuisine is given so much recognition and it takes up so much space in the food world. So yeah, it was me being petty, to be honest, because I really didn't like the dish. And I'm sure that there's several different variations and iterations of coq au vin in France. And that makes me excited because I do love appreciating the I can't say that word, but tú sabes. Intricacies. I can't say.
Intricacies?
Wow. Yeah, I can't. Pero bueno, yeah, I think that all of those nuances really make it exciting for me as someone who loves learning about food and what makes it special. And yeah, they're very similar. They're cousins, you know. And I know sometimes folks, you know, they'll come up to me and say, and especially when I was pitching the book, they would say, Karla, like, just, you know, tell me what's different about Salvadoran cuisine and why shouldn't I say, oh, it's like Mexican food, you know? And the thing is that asking me that question is the wrong question because you think I have something to prove. I don't have anything to prove to you. I'm inviting you to eat at my table. And if you ask me that question, you don't want to eat at my table. Because it's as if you're asking a family that has 3 daughters, why do the 3 daughters look the same? You know, if you called Carmen Fabiola, and that's not her name, she's going to be mad. Have the same kind of decency for people's cuisines if they're inviting you to it. I think it's great that we share cuisine or ingredients, methodologies. Like, I think it's fabulous that we do that because how we make it our own is the whole point. And yeah, I think that when you ask that question, I think it's someone telling on themselves that they are believing these myths about, you know, who gets to have a seat at the table. Well, you get to have a seat at the table if you prove yourself. I don't have anything to prove.
Awesome. And we shouldn't. I mean, why? Yes, let's get hands for that. Yeah, absolutely. And I honestly love that you compare that because it's like, you know, we have these really intricate, difficult to make dishes too. And they deserve a place at the table, these dishes, and in the cookbook.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
One of the super wonderful things I got to do was I got to interview one of the leading food anthropologists in El Salvador, who is a woman, Dr. Claudia Moisa. I will never tire of talking about her. And she was someone I interviewed for this. And she would tell me, Karla, like, the diaspora knows about maybe like 3 kinds of tamales when we have 20 different varieties in El Salvador. You know about these many atoles when there's actually 30 different kinds of atoles. And one of the amazing things that she shared with me last year was that her department, what is left of it, because they keep getting less and less funding and more people being cut, she explained to me that they are now working on an exhibit showcasing and highlighting the different regional nuances of Salvadoran cuisine, which has never been done before, and that is so cool. Of course, it'll take them anywhere between 4 to 5 years to complete it, but it's so exciting that they're, of course, a Salvadoreña is leading this effort, and she's doing it with so much respect and elegance and grace, and is so dutiful to the work, to the people, and I love her.
That's incredible. I can't wait till that's done. And that's something that always blew my mind. Like, you think pupusas are this and that's it, but there are multiple kinds of curtido, even some with like salsa peri, like black. Like, did you guys know? Have you guys anybody had curtido with salsa peri in it? No. So like, this is like a regionalism, right? I think it's out east in Oriente. So just that one little tidbit, just kind of like it's like that quote. I think Arthur Conan Doyle said it. The existence of a drop of water implies a whole ocean. Like, that's the way I see this. This little difference just opens up, explodes open Salvadoran cuisine, and we get to explore it and we get to call it our own.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people, I even had this worry that I would have things, that I would run out of things, because I myself was combating the things being told to me. Oh, what do you have to say? You're from a small little country. What's interesting there? And so you start to believe it. But what I know is true is that the book has 80 plus recipes, and it's maybe 7% of the cuisine. The good news is that there is so much more to learn, and that it cannot be done in a book, certainly not by just myself. We should have more books,
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll see some. Okay, Karla, third thread. This is the last one. We're going to bring it home. So recently, in the past couple of years, the price of oxtail, at least in New York, has just skyrocketed. I don't know if you guys were aware of this. My parents can no longer make sopa de res because we can't afford the oxtail. And the past year, I think New York Times put out an article that talked about how some restaurants are at risk or have already eliminated oxtail dishes from their menu because it just prices them out from the immigrant working class community that they serve. Having said all that, how do you think we started this thread talking about the cost of pupusas? Like, how do you think we should, and Gallo and Chicha, how do you think we should balance elevating our working class kind of food, putting it up there for the world to see and taking ownership of it? How do we balance that with keeping it accessible and protecting it from getting gentrified to the point where it becomes inaccessible to the very community from which it came from?
Wow, that's a loaded topic. I can share observations and insights that I've had. I think I feel like there's a certain feeling when someone from the culture is innovating said recipes. I think we should always prioritize and support those who are getting creative, getting playful. I also think if you see these things, it begs the question, who is this benefiting? If there is a pop-up who's doing pupusas now and they're doing like a birria pupusa, like, who is this benefiting? There's so many kind of fusions, I'll say. I don't love fusion. I think we forget that fusion is a word that means like a la fuerza, like bones fused together. Sounds pretty violent. I do love honesty. I think good writing comes from being honest. I think good food, good eating comes from being honest. I have two friends I love, Jared and Gardenia. He is Taiwanese and she is Salvadoreña. And we were at an event and one of the chefs, who's Salvadoreña, had Salvi chow mein on a plate. It was delicious. She had really made it into something that was fresh and new. And both Jared and Gardenia were like, hey, look, it's us on a plate. And I thought that was just so cute. And it was honest, I feel like when you're trying to pull a gimmick, it comes off that way. You don't need a gimmick to have a seat at the table. I think just get honest about it. Does this make sense? I'll give you another example of people who have taught me something. There are a sister duo who have a pop-up in LA. They are Lebanese Salvadoran. And I asked her a question. I said, so, wow.
New York, Karla.
I support it. It's Saturday, do your thing. And, they're Lebanese and Salvadoran. And so I had their food, and I noticed that they had like a lot of the Lebanese food on this side, and then they had a lot of the Salvi food on this side. And I felt like it was a naughty question. But, pupusas have frijoles, and there's hummus. So I said, would you ever put hummus in a pupusa? And she just looked at me and set me straight with that look. And she said, never. Because my grandmother, my Salvi grandmother, taught me how to make pupusas. And this is how she makes it. And my other grandmother taught me how to make hummus. And this is how you make it. And one of the things I've learned through this work is that a recipe might as well be an address. Like, one of the recipes in there, pollo con aceitunas, that's a recipe that is my mom's address. When she goes into the more, I go into the more, that recipe will be there, and whoever wants to visit Teresa de Jesus Vásquez, ahí la van a encontrar, So I think when we figure out what's the honest address of where you live, because you're Taiwanese and you're Salvadoran and that's your household, what looks honest to you in that moment is going to look different than what looks honest for you in your home, And if you want to be generous and share that with the world, you're not pulling a gimmick. You're inviting people to sit at your table to, hey, look, So I think there's a lot of things to be said. That's my point of view. I don't know what to do about the oxtail.
We're suffering out here, Karla.
I'm always... I love talking to my mom about like, so where did you get the meat this week? Like I love those conversations, like go to Costco because that's where you're going to get this and this and that. I think we're always going to be in that conversation of like, it is actually a conversation as old as time. Like we talk about food, that is our survival. So I don't know if you're satisfied with my answer.
I think it's going to be difficult. I think you could write a whole book about this and exploring this topic, right? It's difficult. That's why it took me, like I said, I've been thinking about this for years, and obviously it'd be unfair for me to expect you to answer it in 5 minutes. But it is something we think about, that I think about, and I think we as a community should think about as well. So I just wanted to hear your reflections on it, to see like where you're at. Maybe that'll help me come to some new, fresh conclusions. But thank you for going on this weird journey with me. Speaking about ingredients and stuff, wanted to talk a little bit about like East versus West, New York versus LA. And I feel like if you take El Salvador out of SalviSoul, you get a book about LA and food. It features so prominently in the book. It's I'm really jealous. Just go down to the mercado, the Salvi Corridor, just get down there, get your fresh flor de sote, just grab it. And I remember when you were doing, Good Morning America? And you asked me to source some fresh loroco. And I'm like, Karla, fresh loroco in New York? I
did. I did ask that of you, didn't I? Did I stress you out, friend?
No, I was like, I'm going to try to get this done. But, I called a couple of restaurants, a couple of friends that used to have restaurants. Where do you source your loroco? Can you get fresh loroco? And it just wasn't possible. So I wanted to ask you, are there, with the reality of living in New York and not having access to these hard to find rare Salvadoran ingredients, are there recipes in the book that we can lean on that might have more easier to find recipes? Or do you have suggestions for substitutions?
The loroco thing is really interesting because I think it's the most we eat a lot of flowers and blossoms in Salvadoran cuisine. And I always thought that was so cool as a kid. Like we eat flowers for breakfast. Like I thought that was so cool. I was like, wow, we eat flowers. And, loroco, I think a lot of people would like it actually because we like things like artichokes. Artichokes are flowers. We eat them. I always say that Loroco has a little bit of asparagus, and that is a bitter flavor that a lot of people see asparagus. They're ready to, I don't know, a side of asparagus at a restaurant will cost you anywhere like $18. And a bag of Loroco is probably about $8. I think there's gatekeepers within the industry of market, because these are not rare flavors that the American palate doesn't already know. So it's actually not Loroco's fault. It's the people, the systems, and the people who are making these decisions saying, no, we want you over there. I think a lot of people really enjoy that flavor. So now that I've said that, as far as replacements, when I've asked my mom, like, Mom, what can you use? She always gives me answers I don't like. And it's an honest answer. You cannot replace the flavor of Loroco. Even though I just talked about artichoke and asparagus, they are like families. But again, you could never replace yourself, the way you come to a place. But I also think that there's a tension there as immigrants. We long to have a connection. And so I think the best place where I've landed is, what are the native edible blossoms and flowers from where you live? Go to your farmer's market. What grows? Because cuisine is first and foremost regional. You eat what is around you. You literally cannot eat what's not around you. Loroco grows in El Salvador. That's why we eat it. The flor de isote, the flor de pacaya, the flor de pito. That's why we eat it, because it grows. It grows there. So have a relationship with the land. Have a knowledge at least of, hey, these are the edible flowers that grow here. Maybe I can source them. And I feel like 9 times out of 10, you will have a very similar flavor profile, because a lot of it is just flowers are going to taste like flowers. They're going to have that really vegetable, earthy, kind of funky taste, slightly bitter, little bite to it. And I think that's an exciting place to also be. And I think that's an exciting thing to learn, is what are the edible flowers of New York? There's so many resources in California, in LA, so many foraging groups. That is essentially what we can do to learn it, because you eat what's around you.
That's really cool. I love that. I love that idea. I live in the Bronx. We have a giant park in the Bronx, Van Cortlandt Park, and there are groups that go around and through the park, and they'll tell you what you can eat, what you can't eat. They'll go on like mushroom finding trips. So that's not just giving me an assignment, Karla. I'm gonna definitely attempt that and see what I can find. And after I learn how to make pupusas, maybe I'll try to make a New York flour and cheese pupusa. That's awesome.
Hey, that sounds delicious.
You never know.
Flores de ayote. You can start there.
Okay. All right. I'll give that a shot. So Karla, to bring it back, you've gone on this incredible journey. What is it, 10, 15 years writing this book? You've seen a lot. You went through these trials and tribulations of getting your book published. From your experience and what you've seen, what do you think needs to change about the publishing ecosystem to have more like culturally specific projects like SalviSoul, or to have more books that can fill up the World's Borough Bookshop? But what do you think needs to change to make that happen?
I'll say this. My experience with my publisher, I think, is the exception. I went in really afraid of what I was going to be dealing with. I had horror stories. I had other cookbook friends who had said to me, Karla, like, my editor told me that I should get a co-author because, my English isn't good. Or they told me that I couldn't pick the photographer. They changed the title, and just horror story after horror story. And they were all women of color. And so I was really afraid. And my experience with my publisher was very different. It was very collaborative. I felt like they really trusted me to take it from A to Z, and never did I feel like odd in that relationship. Having said that, there were some things that you realize like, oh, this is why there's probably not a lot of cookbooks from our community. And it's because it takes money. Like there are some people, for instance, I'll tell you this. Some people, you get the advance for your cookbook. Some people will use those funds to hire agencies to market your cookbook. They don't take that money as payment for themselves, for their livelihood. I can't afford to do that. That's my livelihood. That's how I'm going to pay my rent, my water bill, electricity, my greenies for my dog Rocky. Like, that is what I'm going to do with that. You see a lot of times these wealthy cookbooks or wealthy cookbook authors that keep getting the sponsorships. And it's because they are able to set money aside and invest it into this project. But I need to pay myself, and I mean, I think publishing in some ways is operating the way it was meant to. And I got to where I got because my community, one voice became thousands. And I don't know. It's a big conversation. So, no sé qué decirte. I can share my experience and tell you this is what worked for me. This sucked. But yeah, even including the James Beard Awards. Thank you. The James Beard Awards, I contacted my publisher and I said, hey, can I send you receipts for reimbursement for my travel, my hotel, my meal? What's my stipend going to be for the day? And they said, we only have budget for the application fee to submit your application, to submit your book. And, the application fee was like $75. I was like, oh, man. So if you think about all of that, all of those resources, I could have paid rent several times with what I allocated to this experience. And that was something I made and I stand by it. But damn, would it have been nice to have the support of the publisher in that way. And, I think that there's rules as to why, because then otherwise they have to do it for every author and, that becomes its own thing. But some of those things, you don't know that you're going to be trying to figure out how to write this email. So everything is a new experience and you're learning it as you go.
Got it. Yeah, it's a complicated topic for sure. But I think that regardless of what the publishing industry is or does, we know what we have to do as a community and just step up and support our people and support our projects. So I'm excited to do that, Karla.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Karla, for coming over all the way to New York and sitting down for another interview with me. I really appreciate you doing this and having you here and being so open and sharing about your work and your challenges with this book. And with that, we'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Or comments.
First of all, let's give Karla another round of applause for being a good sport. Awesome. All right. Do we see any hands up? Any questions or comments?
Mm-hmm.
See there in the back. Are you okay with us recording you? I'll record you from up here.
Oh.
Or David, if you can, please. Go ahead.
So thank you so much for the book and thank you for representing the Salvador community. It's such a joy to see it. Just a question for you, like with social, how do you maintain your authenticity while also filtering some things that like the conversations you have, right? Like especially knowing you have another project working on. Like how do you balance like what you want to say versus what might impact you, like your sales or
Oh man! So the question was how do I decide what to share and keeping it real all at the same time? I think I have a tendency to do the most sometimes, and I'm learning to let it be easy. And also, one of the things that I've loved that I got a lot of crystal clear clarity about my project was that I am here to be of service. I had a pain point of wanting to cook Salvi food because I want to know these foods. I don't want to just go to a restaurant. I don't want to just go to my mom's house. I am la señora de la casa. I want to know how to do it. And then I felt like other people wanted that. And so my being of service to my community felt really good, felt very purposeful. And so I kind of let that guide, is this helpful? Is this of service? We're all learning here together, certainly. And I've also learned just from, I've recorded things and I'm like, let me sleep on this, I think sometimes you there's many things I've actually recorded and I've never shared. And I know sometimes like you'll see on Instagram everyone who's like, just post your content. There's millions in your drafts or whatever. I don't know, like if you don't feel good about it, don't feel good about it. Sometimes you just needed to vent and you needed to put the camera in front and see what happened. But I think that filter of, is this being of service, has been very productive for me in discerning what I should share, because this is a teachable moment for all of us. And also like taking care of myself, because sometimes it's not anyone's business what I'm working through. So yeah, it's a good question. And honestly, the answer keeps evolving as the experiences keep happening, because this is my first time doing this, So, yeah, thank you for the question.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Karla, my name is Rodrigo. Thank you so much. Like everyone else, I think we're very happy that you created this and you put it all into one place. I came from El Salvador when I was 10, and so I had to kind of shift into this new culture here. And a lot of that, the food and the cooking that I saw my mom do in El Salvador, I lost it. But we still had our aunts cooking and all that stuff, and I always wanted a place where you could actually have a feel of home of El Salvador. And I kept asking my mom, like, hey, how do I make panes con pavo, or how to make pupusas or whatever. But there was never a place that they could actually share, especially in the digital age. They weren't going to text me a recipe, And so now that this is all in one place, it's like it's a godsend that we have something that those of us that have always wanted to kind of relive and retaste, we can actually do it ourselves. In fact, my mom, who lives in California, she was visiting here a couple months ago, and I showed her your book, and she was excited to see all these recipes that we used to eat in El Salvador together, all in one place. Which brings me to one question: have you considered printing this in Spanish? And two, what's your favorite recipe out of this book, and what's the one recipe that maybe you send people to and be like, this embodies either you or the Salvadorian lifestyle?
Okay, so the first question was the favorite recipe? No, that was the second. Oh, yes. Okay. So that is actually the question everywhere. When is this going to be translated? And I have emailed my agent, and she always says, let me check in with your editor. And then I don't hear back from her. I think a lot of this is a sale. It always goes down to sales. I'll share this. Well, I know this is being recorded, but I think it's okay to share. I like to share wins, because I think that would be of service. So cookbooks are usually, if you can sell 1,000 copies of a cookbook, it's like, wow, you did it. You went above and beyond. I am an author, very niche, my corner of the world is very small, and people sometimes don't expect great numbers from an author like myself focusing in what I'm focusing on. Sometimes you are told it's a sales thing. And even when you get the sales, you don't get the answers you're hoping you'll get when you reach the goalpost. You know? So they'll say, oh, sold 10,000, and then we'll have a conversation. But then maybe they'll say, well, maybe if you sold 25, it might be easier to get this translated. And I don't think that there's any malice necessarily towards me or the project. I think that's just capitalism, you know? If it's easier to make a buck over here for something that we know is going to sell and do well, then that's going to be easier. This was a hard project to get yeses, you know? And one of the things that I really made it my focus was I want to work with people who don't make me feel like they're doing me a favor. I want you to be right beside me and saying, like, put me in yesterday. That's the energy I want. So we're going to eventually get it in Spanish. I know we will, because we got here, you know. So that person, those people who are going to help us take that step haven't found me yet. I haven't found them yet. And there's a lot of kismet, honestly, and a lot of magic that happens with these creative projects. And that's where I'm at with that. Your second question, my favorite, I mentioned it earlier, pollo guisado con aceitunas. That is my mom. My mom's name is Teresa. I love her. She's difficult. I think a lot of our moms are. She and I have a better relationship now than we did before. And I'm so grateful for that. And I think if I love everything that's in the book, but I feel like I sleep better at night because that is a recipe I need to have written down. I walk around new places because I feel rooted and I have that recipe written down. You know that thing you always tell yourself, I should get that recorded. You know, we all have that thing with our elders, right? And you think about it when you think, oh, I've done all the things on my to-do list. And then you remember, but I haven't gotten that story documented. And I've been able to do that. And so that is one. I love everything. I love the plátanos fritos con frijoles. I always tell folks to start with Salvadoran desayuno as a good place to start if you're new to the cuisine. Most people always want to go for like the headliner. Don't go with pupusas. It is hard. Who do you think you are? I know, but like, I know you got to start, but it is an intense project, you know, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can be setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment. And, you know, food is precious. Certainly we know what farm workers go through to provide all of this food. So let's do our due diligence by picking an assignment that is doable, that, you know, allows us to experience success in the kitchen, which is closely tied to our rootedness and our survival. So breakfast is a great place to start.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Any other question?
Yeah, great question. Anybody out there? Any last comments? Going once, going twice. Okay, you'll never see Karla again. She'll never answer any of your questions. Just kidding. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today live and participating, asking questions, giving us feedback. I'm really glad you guys all made it out to come see Karla and to be open to being part of this podcast with us. If you want to watch this again, it'll be in YouTube in a couple of weeks. And you'll also be able to listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. And that's it. Thank you all for tuning in. Let's give everyone a round of applause. Thank you, Karla.
Thank you.
Thank you. Music for this episode, courtesy of Fer Azul, a Salvadoran singer. Thank you for listening to the show. Salvis Unidos is produced and edited by Carlos Guadron. Visit salvisunidos.com for show notes. Like the show? Join our Patreon and help us continue making content for Salvadoreños como vos.